All right, guys. Well, welcome to week 5. This week is a very tough week because there is just so many terms, so many definitions you need to know, and you have to be able to apply every single thing. So, like I said, tough week. We'll be working hard in class. We'll be working hard at home trying to get ready for this so we are ready for that test on Wednesday. Anyway, let's get straight to it then. Now, as we know that the central nervous system starts with the brain, starts with this spinal cord and then connects to the brain. Now, at the top of your spinal cord is your medulla. It is the first large swelling on the top of your spinal cord, and it's dealing with all of your life-sustaining functions like breathing, swallowing, heart rate, all those types of things. Keep in mind, the location of things in your brain are from top to bottom. At the bottom of your brain are your most life-sustaining. Those are the things that need to be protected the most or you cannot function. At the top of the brain, those are the things that make us human, specifically in the frontal cortex. Now, on top of the medulla is the pons. It's a large swelling above the medulla and it connects to the top of the brain, to the bottom, and it plays a part of sleep, dreaming, left and right body coordination, and arousal. So, as you can see, it goes spinal cord, medulla, then pons. Now, once you get on top of that, we start having a little more issues. Now, one of the big topics is reticular formation. Now, reticular formations are neurons running through the middle of the medulla and the pons, and that are in charge of your selective attention. Now, reticular formation is how much you're able to pay attention right now to what you're doing. Like, for instance, if you're sitting in your room right now and you're listening to this amazing YouTube video, you probably are hearing things going on in the background. Maybe you have the TV on. Maybe you're doing laundry like myself and you can hear the washing machine just kick into another cycle. All of those types of things is being selected by your reticular formation. The things that you're paying attention to is what is your reticular formation selecting you to. Keep in mind, at all times, there's so many things going on around you. However, we as humans need to focus on certain things at certain times. We can't process all the information, we have to process only some of it, and that's what reticular formation does. Now, with your reticular formation processing some information, you need another part of your brain to do all the things you're not thinking of, and that's the cerebellum. Now, the cerebellum is the lower part located behind the pons that controls your your involuntary movements, your rapid movements, your fine motor movements. We call this the little brain. It is doing everything that you don't think about on a daily basis. Now, we know the pons and the medulla are also processing some of this information, but it's the cerebellum that does a lot of your regulating, of your breathing and all that stuff. Your reticular formation tells us what we're paying attention to and what we're not. Your cerebellum, everything that is not being processed or given attention to, is going to your cerebellum, and your cerebellum deals with it. Everything that reticular formation decides, oh, hey, we're going to pay attention to it, that's going to continue up your brain and into your cortex. Now, soon as the reticular formation figures out what is going to be selected to be given attention, it goes into the limbic system. Now, the limbic system is a group of several brain structures located under the cortex involved in learning, emotion, memory, and motivation. Now, the very bottom of your brain processes all the information you need to be alive. Your limbic system is everything that gives you any type of emotions, any type of memories, all those types of things. So, your bottom of your brain, your old brain, is processing everything to be alive. Your limbic system makes you an animal. It gives you the motivation, it gives you your learning, it gives you your emotions. All those things monkeys have, and so do we. Now, your limbic system is major function is going to be in the thalamus. Now, it's a part of the limbic system located in the very center of the brain, and this relays sensory information to the proper location from the lower part of the brain to the proper areas of the cortex, like your frontal lobe, your parietal lobe, your occipital lobe, whatever it needs. And this processes some sensory information. So once the reticular formation decides that this information needs to be given attention to, it goes to the thalamus. Once it's in the thalamus then sends it out elsewhere into the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, wherever it needs to be. And this is called the call center. We give it the nickname of the call center of the brain. Now, Also a part of your limbic system is your olfactory bulbs. Now these are just under the front of the brain and they receive information from the nose. The olfactory bulbs is really what we're going to be dealing with when we get to sensation and perceptions, which is next week. Week 2 of sensory sensation and perceptions, we'll start talking about olfaction, but that is also a part of it. Now another component of the limbic system is the hypothalamus. So we have the thalamus and now we have the hypothalamus. Now the hypothalamus is located below the thalamus and it is responsible for all your motivational behaviors such as sleep, hunger, thirst, and sex. So your medulla, your pons, and your cerebellum are dealing with all the involuntary stuff, while your limbic system is dealing with all your motivation, and that's your food, sex, hunger. All of that is being held there. Now your hippocampus is a curved structure located within each temporal lobe and is responsible for the formation. Now, one of the best ways to remember this is the hippocampus. If a hippo came to campus, you'd remember, okay? It's dealing with all your long-term memories. We're going to get more into that as we get to memories here later. Now, your amygdala is another part of your limbic system, and it's located near the hippocampus, and it's responsible for fear responses and memories of fear. So, for instance, if you have a fear of spiders, your amygdala is holding on to that. If you have a fear of heights, your amygdala is that location where that is. If all of a sudden, like for instance, I'm easily startled, my amygdala is dealing with that. So your hippocampus is dealing with all of like your memories, your 12th birthday party, your first kiss, your first date, all those wonderful memories that you have. Your hippocampus holds that. All of like your bad memories, essentially anything that gives you fear and makes you anxious is going to be done with your amygdala. Now here is what your limbic system is going to look like. It is the central part of your brain, and it is going to be it's a central part of your brain, and it's going to be addressing all the things that make us animals. So all your hunger, thirst, sex, emotions. Remember, monkeys have emotions too. Obviously, not all of them are as complex as ours, but definitely they have them as well. So now, we keep referring to this thing called the cortex. Now, what the cortex is the outermost covering of the brain consisting of densely packed neurons. Has so many neurons because it's responsible for your actual thinking process. And we call the cortex, or your cerebral cortex, your thinking cap. It is where all of your thoughts are being processed, which is pretty cool. And this is where we see the interpretation of sensory information. So, for instance, if someone tells you a joke and you have to think about the pun or whatever the joke is telling you about, that is your actual cortex thinking about it. So now on your cortex, it's all wrinkly. It's the outermost layer of your brain. It looks kind of wrinkly. Those wrinkles are actually called corticalization. Now, the wrinkling is due to the fact that there's so dense neurons there. The more surface area we give to those neurons means the more thinking can be done. With that being said, the more area, the more thinking, the faster that we think and all that stuff. So corticalization allows us to think as fast as we do. Now, our cortex, or cerebral cortex, is broken into two cerebral hemispheres, the left and the right. Now, the two sections of the cortex are the left and the right, and they're held together by something we call the corpus callosum. Now, the corpus callosum is like the super dense fiber thing. It looks kind of plastic, actually, if you see it in a real person. And it connects the two hemispheres. These two hemispheres are being able, through the corpus callosum, are allowed to talk and to engage in one another and keep themselves updated. Now, in your cerebral cortex, you have two hemispheres and 4 lobes. Now, your parietal lobe is on both your left and your right. Your occipital lobe is left and right. So it's not just on one side of the brain or not. It's throughout the whole thing. Now, the occipital lobe is located in the back of your brain, and it is containing your visual center, or your visual cortex. Now, this is where all of your raw sensory information from your eyes gets processed, and the information has transduction on your retinas. We'll get to that next week. And then it gets sent to this part of your brain, and this part of your brain, or the occipital lobe, is going to be processing the information for free. Now, your visual association identifies and makes sense of all your visual information. Okay. Next is your parietal lobe. Now, your parietal lobe is located in the top back of each cerebral hemisphere and contains centers for touch, taste, temperature, and sensation. Your parietal lobe is doing all of your kinesthetic. Okay, anything that essentially is touching, like your skin wise, is going to be processed in your parietal lobe. Now, one of the most important things about the parietal lobe is your somatosensory cortex. Now, your somatosensory cortex is processing all the information from your peripheral nervous system that has been sent to your central nervous system and goes straight to your parietal lobe. Once it's in your parietal lobe, it looks at the information, processes that information, and then sends the information to your your motor cortex, which then processes that information. Now, another lobe of yours is the temporal lobe. Temporal or tempo. Okay, music have beats and have a tempo to it, a fast tempo or a slow tempo, so kind of help remember that. Now, it's an area of cortex located just behind the temples or right by your ears, containing neurons responsible for hearing and making meaningful speech. Now, your primary auditory cortex processes the information of your ears. Your auditory association makes a sense of the information. Now, areas of the frontal lobe is where we're going to see a lot of our human aspect being caught up. Now, this is responsible for your higher mental processes, decision making, as well as fluent speech. Keep in mind, monkeys don't speak. Okay, they don't have language. That is why we have a frontal lobe and they don't. Anything that we can do that a monkey can't do has to deal with the frontal lobe. Inside the frontal lobe, we have our motor cortex, which is dealing with motor commands and muscles in the somatic nervous system. It is dealing with all of your fine motor movement, like for instance, monkeys can't type. Okay, all those different types of things are being managed by your frontal lobe. If a monkey can do it, your frontal lobe is not in charge. As you can see, here is a picture of your brain, similar to the one we did in class. Occipital lobe is to the back, your parietal lobe is above it. So parietal and somatosensory cortex are right next to each other, while your motor cortex and your frontal lobe are next to each other. And your temporal lobe, or tempo, is located right above your ears. Makes sense, close to your ears. Now, here's your motor and somatosensory cortex. Different parts of your somatosensory cortex process different information from different parts of your brain. So if you look at the top, you see this elongated body. At certain parts of your somatosensory cortex, or to the right, you're going to see that is where information about your neck, your arm, your hand, your fingers, your thumb, your nose, all of that information is being processed. If you look to the left-hand side, you're going to see your motor cortex, and you can see they receive that information as well, and that information goes down into your peripheral nervous system. Now, as you can see over here, we're going to have a lot of our brain functions starting to come. Now, as you can see on this map, we do have the reticular formation being put in there. It's a system of nerves running from the hindbrain and through the midbrain to the cerebral cortex, controlling arousal and attention. So the more excited you are, the less excited you are, the more you're paying attention, the less you're paying attention. All of that is controlled by a reticular formation. Excuse me. Now, your association areas. These are areas within each lobe responsible for certain types of things. However, we don't know exactly where they're located. So areas within a cortex responsible for some sort of interpretation of information. First one is Broca's aphasia, which is Broca's area, of course, is when broken jaw, is dealing with your speech. When you have Broca's aphasia, it's a condition resulting from damage to your Broca's area, causing unable to speak fluently. So if someone gets into a car accident and they cannot speak correctly, they have Broca's aphasia. If someone gets into a car accident and they're unable to understand or produce meaningful speech, they have Wernicke's aphasia. Now keep in mind, when we talk about these aphasias, it is all about damage to your association area. Broca's area, broken jaw, language production. Wernicke what? language comprehension. So when we have Wernicke's aphasia, it means we have damage to our ability to understand meaningful language. Now, when we have our association areas, we also have something called spatial neglect. Now, it's caused by damage to an association area of the right hemisphere, resulting in the inability to recognize objects or parts in the left visual field. So what happens is if we have too much damage to one side of the brain, we can lose our ability to control that part. Now, one of the cool things about parts of your brain is split brain research. Now, split brain research is when the cerebellum, or the upper part of the brain consisting of two hemispheres and the structures that connect them, the corpus callosum, are separated, which is pretty cool. And so what split brain research is, and I'm going to show you a video on Tuesday about this, it's when we study, it's the study of patients with a severed corpus callosum. Now, corpus callosums, you're born with it. I don't think we have cases of people not born with it. Mostly it's cut in order to stop epilepsy or any other issues of the brain. It's not very common. It's actually very uncommon. However, every time we do this, that case study is very much so studied, as we've talked about before when we have unique situations. Now, what is split brain research? Split brain research involves sending messages to only one side of the brain. So both sides of the brains are not being kept updated about what the other side is doing, and we're going to see it causes a lot of information challenges. Now, we're going to see this does also tell us the specialization of each side. So we're going to see what side's more dominant and what. When we talk about left and right hemispheres, it's important to know that your left hemisphere controls the right side of your brain, and your right side of your body is controlled by the left side of your brain. So it's an opposite. So if I'm right-handed, that means my left brain is more dominant because I'm using my left hand more often. Okay, so we're going to see that this is going to play a huge role. Now, when we've done split brain research, we see that the left side of your brain controls language, writing, logical thoughts, analysis, and mathematical abilities. It also allows us to speak sequentially, or speak from one thing to the next to the next. And also the fact that we can use our words. Remember, left hemisphere, left language, linear logic. All of those start with L's, all of those go with F. Now, your right side of the brain controls your emotion, your expression, your spatial perceptions, recognition of faces, patterns, all those things. Well, your right does so much of the other stuff, and it processes information globally or in a larger picture. However, it is important to know that your right side of the brain can't speak. It does not control your language because your Broca's area and your Wernicke's area is on the other side of the brain. Now, one of the big things about this week is your endocrine system. Now, the endocrine system is going to be releasing hormones into your body, and your pituitary gland is the one in charge of that, or the master gland. Now, hormones are chemicals released into the bloodstream by your endocrine glands, and they are hormones to increase growth, decrease food consumption, all those different types of things. Now, your pineal gland is an endocrine gland named the base of the cerebrum that secretes melatonin, and this is going to make you sleepy. Your thyroid gland is found in the neck that regulates metabolism. Okay, if you have an overactive thyroid, you are super hungry. If you have an underactive thyroid, okay, pancreas is going to control your blood sugar. If you have a problem with this, you have diabetes too. There's different types of diabetes. All of these things occur. Now, the other endocrine glands are your gonads. They are the sex glands that secrete hormones that regulate sexual development and behavior. For women, you have ovaries. For men, you have testes. We also have adrenal glands as well, which are located on the top of each kidney that secrete over 30 different hormones to deal with stress, regulate salt intake, and provide secondary source of sex hormones affecting sexual change of adolescence. So your adrenal glands are actually going to be the ones that are super active during your middle school days. Anyway, guys, that was a lot of information, but I'm trying to keep it short and sweet. Please make sure you are looking at your diagrams of the brain. Both of them we did in class, one with the cortexes and one with the limbic system identified all the way through. Anyway, it's a tough week, but I know you're going to do great this week. Anyway, let me know if there's anything else I can do. Have a great week, guys.